The Beastlands is a plane of nature unbound, a forest ranging from moss-hung mangroves to snow-laden pines, of thick jungles where the branches are woven so tight that no light penetrates, of vast plains where grains and wildflowers wave in the wind with vibrant life. The plane embodies nature's wildness and beauty, but it also speaks to the animal within all living things. If you ever wondered where does your ranger's pet goes to heaven, or your paladin's mighty steed, or your pet goldfish, then wonder no longer. Today we're going to talk about the animal heaven, which as you can imagine is way more than what you probably thought it was. So I had a secret poll done on our last video and you guys voted for this, so you better be happy. Today we're talking about the Beastlands, but before we do that, this video is brought to you by HelloFresh. Get mouth-watering seasonal recipes and fresh pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. So, this is the deal guys. Going to grocery stores is a massive pain. Gas is expensive, and most times you end up buying more than what you actually need. This is 2022, fellas. You don't just get your goods delivered onto your door, alright? At this day and age, you also get your groceries delivered onto your door. Except that HelloFresh is actually even better than that. What makes HelloFresh so good is that you get exactly what you need in order to make your meals, with pre-portioned ingredients that help you cut out prep time and easy step-by-step recipes that are super easy to follow. The amount of waste that is left over after a meal is minimal when compared to buying ingredients at a grocery store. Look, when my girlfriend told me that I needed to start contributing more in the kitchen and make some meals for her every now and then, I got scared. I know how to play D&D, I knew nothing of the kitchen. HelloFresh literally solved that problem for me. It was extremely easy for me to slowly learn how to cook and make my girlfriend happy, because thing is, the recipes are simple and easy to follow, but the meals are legit. There are always over 50 weekly options to choose from, with many that rotate in and out to keep it exciting every time, and you can filter out your selection based on your dietary needs. And you can go vegetarian, pescatarian, you can even filter in only the extra healthy options. And you will feel like a real chef in no time, and I gotta say, my girlfriend was pretty impressed. Now, all that sounds great, but wait until you hear the code, because that is one of the craziest things about HelloFresh. They basically just give you free food, which is amazing. Use the link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code PUGREXMAY16 for up to 16 free meals plus 3 surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes plus free shipping. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. Do not miss that code. You are unironically losing money not taking it. Click my link below and use that code and make that change that you've been wanting to make in your life. Eat healthy and start cooking. Now back to the video. This is the animal kingdom, figuratively and literally. This is the realm where you will find every single natural animal that exists in all of the multiverse, so let's talk about it. This here is a chart of the Outer Planes. This is effectively every single heaven that exists within the Dungeons & Dragons universe. When you die, provided that you venerate a god, you will go to the heaven where your god lies. If you venerated multiple gods, then you will be sent to the heaven that mostly matches your alignment. Right here we have the Beastlands, nestled between the neutral good and the chaotic good worlds. Yet another plane of conflict. Not quite one, not quite the other. On one hand, nature is somewhat precise. There is a reason for why it works the way it does, and there is a place for every creature within the ecosystem, but on the other hand, every creature strives to push every facet of nature towards a completely different direction. There's seldom any effort made by any individual beast to work together or cooperate in any endeavor. The ultimately selfish nature of every animal prevents the plane from being lawful, but the self-correcting nature of the wilderness prevents it from becoming random or chaotic. The animal kingdom is like a sun who spews rays in every direction. Every arrow goes its own way, but at the end of the day, you still have a perfect circle. It's an interesting philosophical position to be in, paradoxical yet understandable. It is also considered a good plane rather than neutral or evil because of its very specific shunning of murder and the love and care that the layer itself and the gods within have over the concept of freedom and the sanctity of life. For example, you do not hunt for sport or for fun, you do so to eat and survive. You do not cruelly maim your target, you instead respect its sacrifice for the food chain to thrive. So anyways, enough about philosophy, let's talk about the plane itself. So, like I said before, if a natural beast dies in the real world, in the prime world, then it goes here. These animals, however, are a tiny bit more intelligent and considerably more powerful than the normal ones. Animals with 1 in intelligence, like crabs or insects for example, might get an intelligence of 2 or so, which would allow them to understand the world a bit better, like a badger or a horse would. A cat might become as intelligent as a monkey or a dolphin, and an ape might even be able to communicate with you. In terms of power, generally they have about twice the hit dice as they used to have back when they were alive in the prime world, so effectively they would have double the levels. A dire wolf, for example, would have 10d10 hit dice rather than just 5, so you can use that as a gauge to fix the stats accordingly if you so desire. Now, a normal non-beast person that dies in the real world but then gets sent into the Beastlands as their heaven, get this, becomes an animal, but not just any animal. They become an intelligent animal. See, that is the fun part about the Beastlands, is that if you're exploring it as an adventurer, you're indeed going to encounter intelligent animals that can speak to you as if they were people, because they used to be people. The petitioners of the Beastlands become talking animals that represent their personalities that they had back in life, which is just really cool. If you had the ability to cast spells in life, you might also retain much of that power as a beast in this heaven as well. But what is also cool is what happens to those that travel in here, even if momentarily. A planar adventurer that finds itself within the Beastlands also has their shape changed, though a bit more subtly and over time. It takes longer for a lawful person to change, whereas a chaotic character would change rapidly, at the time ranging between a few hours to a few weeks. But basically, when you enter this heaven as a traveler, you gain animal features depending on both your personality and your abilities. A character whose highest stat is strength may develop gorilla-like fur all over its body, or perhaps strong tiger-like jaws or stripes across its face. If dexterity is your highest stat, you might get rabbit ears or snake eyes. For a constitution, perhaps a long elephant trump or a horse tail. For intelligence, you might develop ambidextrous use of your legs as hands, just like an ape does. For wisdom, feathers might cover your entire body like an owl, or you might even go so far as to develop a shell on your back like a turtle. If charisma is your highest stat, you might develop cute attributes like puppy eyes, or a tiny deer tail. For those that are just travelers in this plane, the transformation typically is only a few physical characteristics that change to that of the animal, and they're mostly based on what stat is your highest, so generally it is all about your physical attributes. For petitioners, that's the people that died and then came in here as their heaven, that transformation is typically more about your personalities. For example, if you used to live life as a person who sang as a singer, then you might turn into a singing bird when you die. Or if you served as a staunch paladin defender, then you might get turned into a loyal hound. In general, basically everyone who is in this place is an animal in one way or another. Now, before we go deeper talking about who lives here and how the plane really functions, we should definitely talk about how the plane even looks like in the first place, because it just dawned on me that I kinda haven't even talked about that really. So, the Beastlands is meant to be a heaven, not just for the animals, but really for the entirety of the natural world. And so, it's not just forests, even though that is mostly what is shown to us in most of the official art. There are mountains, there are snowy regions, there are swamps, and even deserts. Every biome considerable is here, since of course, this heaven has to cater to literally all of the natural world, including things like insects and fungi. There are entire sections of this heaven that is nothing more than massive mushroom forests, and insect colonies, and massive mountain peaks where avian creatures live. Though I should mention that plant matter certainly exists in abundance everywhere you go in this place. So even in the deserts, there are plenty of arid plant life like cacti. The whole plane itself is segmented into 3 different realms like so, with the realm at the top being the first layer, the realm in the middle being the second layer, and then the realm at the bottom being the last layer. This is an important distinction because it basically tells you where you're going to show up if you first make it here, in particular if you get here from the astral plane. So in essence, this realm right here is the closest to the astral plane, while the rest are deeper into the realm. Each layer is defined by the time of the day that is always present on it. So for example, in Krigala, it is always noon. The sun, which is called Selara, is always at the very top of the sky, regardless of where you are in the layer. It is meant to be hot and humid, and it does not matter how covered from the sun you are, it is always perfectly illuminated, though of course you can definitely cover yourself from the heat of the sun if you're under leaves or some kind of cave system. But otherwise, there is no running away from that scorching hot sun. The middle layer is called Brox, and in here, the land is in a perpetual state of sunrise, or I guess sundown, depending on your point of view. The sun is always on the horizon, casting its red shadow upon the world on one side, but then on the other side you have the moon, which is always present, but in the opposite horizon. The moon is called Noctis, and it absorbs the magical light power from the sun, balancing the light on Brox so as to create a nice, even, and reddish dawn feel that is perpetual wherever you go on this layer. Then lastly we have the third layer called Karasutra, where it is a perpetual night and the moon is always at the very top of the sky. In here, the moon absorbs absolutely every single bit of light in the land, to the point where you literally cannot light any form of light in the realm. If you try and light up, for example, like a torch, it will not work. If you try to put up a fireplace, it won't turn up. Now, sources of light that are brought from a different layer of the Beastlands or from an entirely different plane will work, but only if they were on when you transition towards Karasutra, and even then, they will only last for half the normal time and will shine for half as much while in here. Now, magical light does work, but it also illuminates half as much. Now, the moonlight of Noctis does indeed illuminate the entirety of Karasutra enough that one can travel within it, but that's the only light that you'll be able to use, as the moon basically absorbs every other source of light energy. Now, the sun, Celera, and the moon, Noctis, are treated as if they are alive, like actual living spirits of the land itself, but whether or not they're actually sentient or what they are really is poorly understood by the residents of the realm and left very vague on the lore. The lore makes a lot of pointed signs so as to suggest that the Beastlands themselves are alive in one way or another, as if the whole plane itself is like a living thing with the ability to make itself known, but it doesn't really go so far as to explain much about this entity or whether or not it has any desires or even sentience for that matter. The state of exactly what the heavens are is actually an enormous point of contention for scholars within the world of Dungeons & Dragons, since you have to understand that most of these places actually existed way before the onset of gods as we know them today. The gods that live in Mount Celestia, for example, can't quite control or really manipulate the mountain as much as they wish they could. And the mountain itself creates its own servants in the form of archons, which are completely separated from the angels that are created by the gods. The Beastlands, for one, actively shuns the invasion of other deities, which is a very fascinating topic of conversation for scholars that try to understand this particular plane of existence. Deities that would otherwise be all-powerful in most other heavens barely have any power in the Beastlands. For example, Muradin, one of the most powerful gods in Dungeons & Dragons, controls an entire mountain in Mount Celestia, basically an entire infinite layer of one of the most powerful heavens. Garl Glittergold has so much influence and power over the layer of Dothian that the layer is literally synonymous at this point with the Golden Hills, which is his realm. Now, you compare that with here, and you will see a stark difference. It appears that a greater deity, the strongest that one can be in the Beastlands, can only control his immediate lair, whether that is a keep or a town or a hill. But as soon as you go out of that lair, the land becomes encroached and taken over by the wild nature of the Beastlands, and the god cannot do anything to stem the encroaching power of the land. What's interesting is that this lack of influence over the terrain appears to affect only non-bestial gods, to which I am sure that you would follow with, well, what is a bestial god? Well, I'm glad you asked. And many believe that the bestial gods are avatars or representations of the Beastlands as a whole, again, with the supposition that the plane itself is somewhat alive. These gods are called animal lords, or sometimes called the generals of the animal spirits, and they are effectively demigods who serve the animals that they represent. It is unclear if there is an animal lord for every single animal, but we do know that some animal lords can represent broad categories of animals. Like, for example, the cat lord represents all cats, whether they are panthers or tigers or even simple domestic cats. There are allusions that these lords may obtain their power from their prime world counterparts. So, for example, a wolf lord might get its power from the devotion of all wolves in the prime material plane. But there are also allusions that the Beastlands themselves grant them energy, so it is actually unclear where they get their power. Technically speaking, they only have demigod status within the Beastlands, but again, because the Beastlands themselves limit so much of the power that non-beast gods have in this place, it is very likely that many of these demigods could potentially compare to a single greater deity in might if they are found here. Now, since a lot of this content comes from 2nd edition, we actually do not have 5th edition equivalents when it comes to things like challenge ratings, but what I can tell you is that in 2nd edition, a Beast Lord granted just a tiny bit less experience when defeated than a Pit Fiend, and they had a similar amount of hit points, so a challenge rating of 20 wouldn't be too far off the mark for a particular Beast Lord. Fighting a Beast Lord in the Beastlands, however, or in its den, might grant it some divine small bonuses that one would have to contend with, so of course you have to keep that in mind. Now, the Beast Lords do indeed function similar to gods in the sense that they often find themselves dealing with their subjects in the prime material world when the situation demands it. They often have two forms, one which is purely their animal form, and then another which is a humanoid shape that they take in order to blend in with humanoids when the situation demands it. Now, for those of you who are big fans of Planescape art, because I know that there are lots of you out there, this one, which is in my opinion one of the most beautiful ones I have seen, it is actually of the human shape of a Cat Lord. I say a Cat Lord because this one is no longer the Cat Lord, and the position is hereditary, and many Cat Lords have taken the position since 2nd edition. Right now, the Cat Lord is believed to be a Werecat man. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about all of the different inhabitants of the plane. Let's go even deeper than this. Based on everything that we have talked about, you might be under the impression that it might be a fairly bad idea for humanoids to live here, considering how dangerous a place like this might be without really any positives. The thing about the Beastlands, though, is that being here feels awesome. The plane makes you feel more invigorated and more vital. Well, in here, your mind is always alert and your reflexes are always sharp, and you no longer feel clumsy while walking or jumping. Your stride is like quick and agile. Your hunger pains are indeed more acute, but food and drink taste better in here than anywhere else, and it satisfies you more deeply too. You always fall asleep quick, and that sleep will be incredibly deep and restful, and when you wake up, you always feel incredibly well rested and immediately alert. Who doesn't want that? They say that you never feel more alive than the time that you spend in the Beastlands. Like, every moment is worth living. Living in here as a humanoid, it basically feels like living in a Monster Hunter world. Settlements are incredibly small, maybe just like 20 people big at most. They are protected by simple palisades and filled with brave hunters who go out to explore in order to hunt down enormous animal behemoths to bring back home for delicious food. Every person in here has a fun animal trait to their figure and probably wields enormous weapons and have enormous armors made from animal materials, since there is literally no mining or trading for mineral materials anywhere on this realm. So it literally feels like living in a Monster Hunter ecosystem, which is kinda cool. Oh, I actually forgot to mention this, it is very important. So, natural animals from the prime world who die end up here, of course, like we mentioned before, but what happens then is they get to enjoy their perfect heaven, but only for an indeterminate amount of time. And, while they're in there, if needed, they learn from their gods. See, learning from their gods is important for situations in which the natural habitat of the animal might be rapidly changing, or maybe because the animals cannot cope with the changes that are happening. At that point, it would be the duty of the god to basically teach the animals how to evolve and how to adapt. It is important because all animals are, in fact, reincarnated. Once they live out their perfect heaven for some time, they are then sent back into the prime for them to live their normal lives again. This is actually the D&D explanation as to why animals have natural instincts, because they have presumably learned those throughout either multiple lives or because the animal gods taught them those tricks in order to survive better. On the other hand, humanoid petitioners, so those would be normal people that died and then ended up here and then got turned into sentient animals, do the normal petitioner thing where they basically stay in the heaven until they are ready to become one with the land or become one with their god. They do not reincarnate. But yeah, I've just realized that I hadn't told you guys that is kind of a big deal. But anyways, outside of humanoid explorers, natural animals will be reincarnated, and then petitioners living as sentient animals, you also have animal-like beings who call this place home, like for example, good lycanthropes. There's actually a mountain on the Beastlands called Ursus, in which lays a small town also called Ursus, where the god Balador, who is the god of protection of forest and a god of werebears, resides. His realm is less of a town really and more of a campsite, a divine campsite, if you will. The god is hella chill. People call him Father Bear. He has no priest or anything, he's just there, just chilling, willing to give you directions or any help that you might need, all in exchange for a simple good story. Father Bear is just there for you, man. Anything you need, he got you. Quote, his domain is more of a tribal village than anything. His petitioners are arranged around a central cooking fire. Brightly painted tents, sturdy wigwams, and comfortable tepees are filled with the sounds of laughter, the aroma of pipeweed, and the simple joys that good food and well-spun tales bring. One of Father Bear's and his petitioners' favorite activities is to assume bear form and go fishing for the large trout and river salmon that inhabit all of the Beastlands' waterways. End quote. If you need to smoke some weed, relax a bit, and go for some salmon, just come right over to your bro, Father Bear. He will take care of you. Now, on the Beastlands, you can also find the heaven of the Centaurs, specifically that of Skerrit, who is the god of the Centaurs. They are not as chill as Father Bear. Quote, Skerrit's glade is secluded amidst the temperate forest in the foothills of Krigala's mountains. The lush vibrancy of the forest is subdued in the glade. This quiet pastoral setting epitomizes the peaceful solitude all centaurs hope and dream will be there someday. The small forest realm is a mix of deciduous and coniferous trees, mingling the scents of pine, maple, and cedar. The grass is thick and soft beneath petitioners' hooves and tastes even sweeter than Oceanus' water. Small birds fill the air with their quiet lifting songs, and a large clearing inside a wide ring of huge ancient oak trees, it's where Skerrit's faithful greet centaur and visitor alike. End quote. Another really cool group of people that live on this heaven, and I do think that you're gonna like this, are the famous Avarial, the flying elves that everyone in 5th edition wants to play, but whose DMs won't let them. Now, they do find the term winged elves to be hurtful to them, by the way, so don't call them that. They like to know that they are more than just elves with wings, of course. It kind of offends them. They tolerate the name Avarial, but the real name that they use is the Al-Karak Ilam. They have a city that covers about a square mile horizontally and almost a half a mile vertically. A city that is mostly high up on the trees to the point where their lowest point is about a mile up from the ground. It is, however, very big because they share the city with a lot of giant eagles and other enormous avian creatures. They are highly reclusive, so they don't really mingle with other humanoids at all, so not much is known about what's going on in there. Now, there is a very mysterious location within the Beastlands, specifically in Krigala, the top sunny layer. It is called the Forbidden Plateau, and it is essentially a massive wide pillar of volcanic stone. It rises hundreds of feet up from the ground, way above the canopy of the trees around it. On the top, there is an isolated plateau with mysterious creatures that roam inside. Many travelers and adventurers have attempted to get up there, but it is very difficult. That is because, well, technically you cannot fly in the Beastlands. I actually forgot to mention that incredibly crucial part, but we will talk about that in a bit. At the top of this plateau, those who have seen it claim to hear high-pitched screeches, deep-throated rumbles, and thunderous loud bellowing from above. The nature of what is above there is a constant source of tales within the Beastlands and places within Sigil, since most people can't quite get there, and those that do tell stories of the behemoths that exist there. Tales that almost don't seem real. That is because, ladies and gentlemen, that is the land of the dinosaurs. Quote, like a world lost in time, the plateau is ruled by the terrible lizards. Dinosaurs of all sizes live here, from the smallest ground-running critters up to the beasts that shake the ground with each multi-ton step. In such an isolated environment, the hunting dinosaurs soon notice anything foreign to the plateau, sense, tracks, strange noises, and then move up to investigate. Though the plateau is vast, there is no easy escape for those who become the dinosaurs' prey. End quote. Those in the know that understand how rare dinosaurs are or how powerful they can be wonder about the isolated nature of their paradise above the ground. Many actually believe that they must be up there for a reason, that they are probably hiding or protecting something of great value. For a deity or some greater force to go out of their way to raise such a massive column of rock and then populate it with some of the most powerful animals that exist in the world, there must be some ancient magical artifact in there, or perhaps a deity who simply desires privacy. Nobody really knows who or what that could be. But now the last group of creatures of interest that live in the Beastlands is one that you would have never expected, and I mean it this time. You really probably did not expect this one. We are talking about the Cloud and Storm Giants. That is because on Karasutra, the layer of night on the Beastlands, you can find the floating fortress of Strone Mouse. the giant god of the sky, weather, seas, and joy, and the primary deity, of course, of many cloud giants and all storm giants. His keep is called Stormhold. Quote, "The most powerful deity in the Beastlands, Strongmouth's presence is felt anywhere he goes. While he travels the Beastlands freely, Strongmouth favors Karasutra simply for the way the moonlight plays off the battlements of his opulent flying castle on the clouds. Strongmouth often swims in a magical pool inside Stronghold with his sister Hiatia, the giant goddess of agriculture and nature, and Surminare, the queen of the Selkies." End quote. The Selkies are kind of like lycanthropes. They're like were-seals, basically. They're kind of cute, I guess. Strongmouth is a greater deity, so he is very, very strong, and his presence in the Beastlands is actually very important for the general politics of the area. See, the gods that typically reside here in the Beastlands are, how do I put this, weird, I guess. The Beast Lords don't really hang out with anybody. They frankly don't care about the general world out there other than just how it affects their charges. Gods like Father Bear only really care about enjoying the forest and protecting it, but even if there was a popular god here in the Beastlands, dealing with the untamed wilds of nature is kind of dangerous. And like I said, gods don't really have much power in the jungles of this plane, and so many gods don't like to step down into that crazy untamed mess, and so in comes Strongmouth. His castle flies high up in the sky where everyone who goes and meets him is perfectly safe. The god himself is a god of joy, so he is a perfectly good host, and he can easily move his castle from Karasutra to Brox or to Krigala, depending on the desires or needs of those that he invites. Further, and this is kind of important, he is a greater deity, and so he can easily grant protection to any of his guests that most other gods could frankly just not grant. And so, thanks to all of these things, Stormhold has effectively become a meeting place for many of the deities who deal with or worship nature in one way or another. But alright, so let's talk about flying in the Beastlands, because I mentioned it before, you kind of cannot. So, I guess I lied when I said that the Cloud and Storm Giants are the last group of interesting creatures that live on this plane. There is also the Mortai, so how do I explain this? The Beastlands is meant to be a heaven for all kinds of natural creatures, of course, but also certain unnatural creatures, as long as the concept of nature flows through them, or as long as they have animalistic traits. You know, like a werebear is not really like natural, clearly they are unnatural, but they are good natured, they admire the land, and well, they are technically bears, so they count as being someone that would come into this type of heaven. These same concepts can be applied to plant creatures. Things like treants, for example, or shroom people can very easily make the Beastlands their heaven, and they are very well accepted within the ecosystem. Well, and this is a bit awkward, but the clouds are also very important. Some would say integral part of nature, in the same way as plants are. And so in this realm, many of the clouds are actually technically alive, and they are called the Mortai. These creatures basically just, they look like clouds, some being literally miles long, but they are certainly alive. They effectively function like demigods, just kind of aloof in the sky, being nigh immortal. If one of them in particular wishes to interact with you, it would start growing heads alongside the rim of the cloud stuff, heads which you would then be able to communicate with. Strongmouth apparently interacts very often with these creatures on his flying castle. Now, the Mortai are something of an enigma on the realm, and generally there appear to be three theories as to what they might be. Some believe that they are simple manifestations of the sentience of the realm itself. Another theory states that they are demigods of air, subservient to the gods of air within the upper planes. And then the third theory, which many believe to be the most likely, is that they are collections of many different chaotic spirits put into one singular creature, effectively the spirits of many dead mortals who either had cloud-like personalities when they were alive, or spirits who ended up on the Beastlands because they venerated some bestial god, but their alignment was far too chaotic for them to settle on a singular animal body, and so they basically became amorphous. People seem to believe this to be the case because any particular Mortai appears to hold multiple personalities within it, and sometimes one can even hear those personalities talking amongst themselves inside of the cloud, so they could very well be just multiple petitioners put into the body of one. In any case, it is described that because of the mighty power that these godlike elemental creatures hold over the skies of the Beastlands, any kind of air-related magic automatically fails within this heaven. So any spell that deals with elemental air just simply does not work. Period. You cannot cast spells like Fly, you can't cast spells like Wind Wall, none of that. You can't even cast Featherfall, by the way. It's very restrictive. You can only make these spells work if either you gain the Blessing of Amortai, or if you are given what is called a spell key, which is an object that grants you freedom to use magic as normal within the plane. I see many heavens have strong restrictions as to what kind of magic you can cast in there. Like, for example, many good heavens will straight up just prevent you from being able to cast particularly evil spells. Restrictions like those can be broken by having spell keys given to you by sources of power within that particular heaven. In this case, you would probably need a spell key given to you by Strongmouse, since he is of course a god of the sky, so he would have the power to grant you such a key. There really aren't many other restrictions on this heaven though, other than your very typical stuff. Like, for example, summoning spells can only summon creatures that exist within the heaven. You would not be able to, for example, summon a fire elemental unless you're specifically summoning a fire elemental that already exists within the realm. Summoning spells actually just kind of suck in here because most of what you would be able to summon are going to be beasts, obviously. But then the thing is, the nature of the Beastlands makes it so that beasts are impossible to dominate or control. They are effectively immune to any and all kinds of charms. So you can summon a beast, but you would not be able to force it to do your bidding, which is what typical summoning spells do. In fact, the lore states that because of the wild powers of the Beastlands, rangers that have pets and paladins that have steeds, they actually lose those animals upon entry into the heaven. Those animals will simply run away into the plane, only returning to you when you're about to leave. Nobody owns or controls animals in here. And once they step in, they become feral, as if how God always intended, I guess. Anyways, fellas, that's basically it. I hope that you enjoyed the Beastlands, a really interesting heaven to say the least. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, Barry Mascant, 5e Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Doc Feeder, The Great Codini, Omega Scales, Terry Culp, Benjamin Bosters, Folky951, Ordoric, Sabim Kurshab, Thomas Hunt, Soulless Rider, Stephen, Lost Crusaders, Stalia, Treb909, Trevor Hess, The Living Guild Pack, D-Scribe, Herbert Johnson, The Wizard's Vault, James the Perverted, Shoddycast, Jesse Feliciano, Lucas Cyrek, Naktor Ashura, Brian Camp, John Harley, John the Wicked, Shane and Sam Skinner, Warren Smith, Baruch, Alyssa Kestrel, Kristen Coleman, Lactose the Intolerant, Anikon the Wolf of Shadows, Flameback 200, Merton Games, Falcon Scientist, Houndson Games, Liberty or Death, and Xenoman for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being awesome. And if you stayed up all the way until the end, I have a little surprise, well, not really a surprise for you. It's a poll. You get to vote on the poll. I'm going to hide a poll at the very end of the description of the video, and you'll get to basically pick what video we're going to do next. So pick wisely, of course. On the last video, you guys picked and decided on the Beastlands, which I think was a pretty good... I was actually surprised that you guys picked up the Beastlands. I was certain that you guys would just pick the common favorites, like something like the Nine Hells or something, but no, you guys picked up a really cool one, so I appreciate it. I'm gonna let you guys choose again, because you guys made a really good choice. But yeah, see you guys next time.